Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Psychological Theatre. We have continued our discussions. We have continued them in a sense of self inquiry, and we have even stressed on the fact that why self inquiry is important in life. We have discussed a lot about the nature of thought. We have discussed about time, and now I think I would like to pick up things from our everyday life in the sense that they are what a common person is used to practice, used to say, used to behave. And we would examine some of those aspects of life. I know we have always said that everything we discuss on the channel is related to daily life, but the things we have discussed till now, which are related to daily life, have not been so obvious things. Okay, like movement of thought is related to daily life without a doubt, but it is not something that a common person sees it that way. A common person does not see the movement of thought as something related to everyday life. But now we want to take up things which are very evident, which are very obvious to any person. And one of those things is the fact that we possess polarities in a sense. What do I mean with polarities? The word polarities means to have poles, and poles indicate opposites. So to have opposites in life is what is something a person feels that yes, this is very common in me. To make it more and more evident, make it more and more obvious, to say that I have a bit of goodness and I have a bit of evil or bad. I have a little bit of happiness, I have a little bit of sadness. So we generally think that this kind of polarities are very much possible and common inside of us. And maybe in today's video, let's take the example of being good and bad. That's very, very common to anyone. So most people believe that they have a good side and they have a bad side. And they also believe that sometimes the good side takes control and they act nicely. Sometimes the bad side takes control and they act in a bad way. And that's why when they do something, or when someone does something wrong, the claim is, please don't think I'm a bad person, just the situation was like so, just the timing was so, and I behaved in this way and that way, and it's not how I am all the time. I'm also a nice person who helps others, and this and this and this. So we all believe with that this division of good and bad exists inside of us, that there is a good side and that there is a bad side. And this is kind of like a gradient theory. Okay, a gradient, word gradient means a gradual change. Okay, so much used in mathematics, in calculus, it's very obvious, but in general as well, you could say a gradient of colors, a grade, school grades. So a change in grades is called a gradient when there are grades. So we call ourselves as if our goodness and badness are in these gradients, that I am good, and then there's a less level of good, then there's another less level of good, then there's another less level of good, and then let's say this side is the good side, and then this side is the bad side. And in all these gradients we fluctuate. Someday I'm on the bad side, someday I'm on the good side, if I have a good mood, bad mood. And this kind of this is how we kind of try to justify our behavior. But there's one very important aspect that we all assume in all this, but we never say it out loud, we never express it out loud, but it's inherently present in all our claims. And that assumption is that the goodness and the bad, the good and the bad are always present in me together. Okay? When I'm acting bad, don't assume that I'm all bad. A part of me is also good, and that part still exists at the same time when I'm acting bad. And in the same way, when I'm acting good, please don't assume I'm all good. I can also act in a bad way, but that part of me is not active at the moment. But it still exists at the same time as the good. So we have this inherent assumption that the good and the bad can exist inside of us at the same time. The mind can be broken down into two parts. It maybe the mind is broken in many parts, but at the moment, for simplification of our discussion, I'm just breaking it into two parts, and one part is the good part and the one part is the bad part. But both those parts exist at the same time in me. Not once. According to one situation, one part starts to act. According to another situation, some other part starts to act. When things go my way, the good part starts to act. When things don't go my way, the bad part starts to act. But in all this, the inherent assumption is that when the good is acting, the bad is not gone totally. And when the bad is acting, the good is not gone totally. So they are just, one becomes dormant and the other becomes passive. And some other time the other becomes dormant and the first one becomes passive. So this is our general assumption about the mind, which every person assumes. Okay, every person would say, yes, there's a little bit of good in me and there's a little bit of bad in me. Now, this very assumption is what we want to question. We want to question whether the mind can be divided. Can the mind be divided into the good and the bad? Or other way of asking the question, can the good and the bad exist in me at the same time? Can I be good and bad at the same time? I know it's a very illogical statement to say I am a good and I am bad at the same time, but this is what we generally assume on the backside of our minds. So this very assumption that the mind can be divided into good and bad, and yet the mind can stay the same. Okay, what do I mean by this? I'm good and I'm also bad, but I'm still the same entity. The moment I divide something, one becomes two. Okay, that's the meaning of division, that I break something, one becomes two. But our claim is very mysterious. We say, yes, my mind can be broken down into good and bad, but yet it's still one mind. I'm still the same person. It's one person having two parts. But this very statement, one person having two parts, is kind of a contradictory statement. If there are two parts, then there is no one. And if there is one, then there are no two parts. I hope you're trying to see me. If I have a cookie in my hand, a circular cookie, a biscuit, either the biscuit is not broken, then it's one biscuit. But if I break it in half, then these are two parts. Okay? Then there are two biscuits in my hand, a half biscuit in this hand and a half biscuit in that hand. But we kind of claim that we are two broken parts, good and bad, and yet it's one biscuit, and yet it's one person, yet it's one mind, so as to say. Now, this statement is highly illogical, so as to say. Maybe someone might not see that, but the feeling of not being able to see it comes from the memory effect of this statement. Okay? I have a memory that I am one entity, I am one person. And now I see, I have evidence in my hands that I can act in two ways. I'm good and I'm bad. Right? So, is the person who is acting good the same person who is acting as bad? Are you able to follow me? One day you are acting in a nice way, in a good way, in a respectful way, in a mannered way. One day you take care of people, and the other day you are totally ruthless and violent towards people. Now, even though these two behaviors are totally poles apart, okay? The behavior of being kind, a behavior of being compassionate, and the behavior of being violent. These two behaviors are totally different. And yet, we do not say that these are two different people. We say it's the same person acting one way on one day and one way the other day. Right? But what does this one person stand for? The person, this one person, does he or she stand for compassion or violence? You cannot say, I stand for compassion and violence together, because that's just illogical. Either you stand for compassion or you stand for violence. But you say, no, one day I stand for compassion, one day I stand for violence. But then I beg to raise the question that these two behaviors are totally different. And hence, these two persons are also totally different. Right? One person acts in a compassionate way and the other person acts in a non-compassionate way. Even though these are the broken parts of the same mind, even though the person is the same, person A acts in a violent way one day, and the same person A acts compassionately on the other day, or at least he sees it like that he's acting compassionately. Let's not use the word compassion, let's use the word good and bad, which were our starting words. So the same person acts in a good way one day and bad way the other day. Is he the same person? Is he or she the same person? Because you cannot stand with two values at the same time. Are you feeling me? Because your behavior, your action depends on your values, how you see life, in what way you see life, okay? How you define good and bad, right? So, you cannot say that one day being nice and helpful was the right thing to do in my mind, and the other day being violent was the right thing in my mind. Because that kind of shows that the mind has two judgment scales. Okay? Depending on the situation. One day the mind thinks that being good is the right thing to do, and the other day the mind thinks being violent is the right thing to do. Right? Now, this exposes the mind's cleverness and trick. Now, when I said that statement that one day being nice is the right thing to do and the other day being angry is the nice thing to do, or the right thing to do, you totally would agree with me. You would say, yes, this is how we live our lives. One day I see that being nice and helpful is the right thing to do, but on some days I see being angry is the nice thing to do, or the right thing to do, sorry. But this exposes that the mind is changing its standards according to situation. The mind is changing its belief system according to situation. One day it believes that helping people is right. The other day it believes that attacking people is right in any way. Okay? So it means the mind has multiple belief systems, or it brings us back to the same point that the mind is broken. The mind has parts. One day one part is acting, the other day the other part is acting. Okay? So this whole scenario of being broken into parts either shows me that one person is actually not one person, it's many person. Okay? Because there are many frames of references inside of a person, there are many parts inside of a person, and every day according to situation, the one part starts to act. And this one part might have a different set of belief than the other part of the mind. And yet, even though these could be totally poles apart behavior, the mind still calls itself as one. Okay? The mind likes to call a broken entity, broken parts, as one. You know those puzzles that kids do where a photograph has been broken into many parts and you have to assemble it together? Yeah. So the mind is saying, even though the parts are broken, they haven't even been integrated, yet it's one. Okay? And you might be feeling the same right now, because in your mind the question might be coming, but yes, all those parts represent one photograph. So they are one, kind of. Right? This very fact also shows how the mind assumes fragmentation as unity. That even though there is a deep sense of fragmentation in the mind still assumes that the fragmentation is actually overall united by some entity, by something. Okay? And if the mind have different point of views, the different belief systems, different ways of making judgment, that today the mind's way of judgment is to be nice and the other day the mind's way of judgment is to be angry or bad, then is there a central belief system which is controlling all the other smaller belief systems? Okay? Today it's nice to help people. Some other day it's nice to fight with people. Now, these two actions are totally different, to help and to fight. Yet, the mind is saying that those are both right actions. One day, being helpful is the right action. The other day, to fight is the right action. So, what is the central criteria by which the mind is defining what is right? And if you would observe it a bit in detail, a bit carefully, then you would see that that central criteria is self-centeredness, self-profit. Right? The mind appears to be fragmented, or let's put it this way, let's not use appears, it's a dangerous word. The mind stays fragmented to fulfill the central criteria of the mind, that is self-profit. Okay? The mind does not care whether it's acting in a peaceful way or whether it's acting in a violent way. The mind only cares about self-profit, selfishness. The ego only cares about its own profit. One day the profit is if the ego acts in a way in which it is helping people, being nice, being polite, to impress those people for your profit. The other day, the ego is fighting with the same people or different people, because in fighting there is the profit. Right? So there is a sense that we have that I am the good and I am the bad at the same time. Okay? But actually the good and the bad cannot exist together. They are totally different entities. It's like an electron and a proton are together. Totally opposite things. They don't stay together. They still, even in an atom, they are distant apart, holding each other as forces. Okay, but even here, it's not even that. Those are physical entities, whatever. But here, it's in our psychological world where we judge something to be good and we judge something to be bad, and that judgment is not based on some actual goodness or some actual badness. The judgment is only based on the factor of self-profit. At one moment, this action is good for self-profit. At another moment, the other action is good for self-profit. Right? And that is why the mind sees itself to be fragmented, because the mind cannot ignore seeing that one day I act this way, the other day I act this way. I have evidence in my hands that I am acting multiple ways, right? Which is fragmentation. That one day I act this way, one day I act this way, one day I act the other way. But the mind still sees that it's one mind. So it wants to say, I am one person who is good, bad, ugly at the same time. Okay? But those things don't exist at the same time. What exists at the same time is the mind's judgment of its own actions based on self-profit, based on the principle of selfishness. Based on the principle of selfishness, one action is good, one action is bad, one action is ugly. Okay? So, try to catch yourself when you assume this principle of that you are good and bad together. Good and bad cannot be together. Medicine and poison are never together. Okay? Light and darkness are not together. Where there is one, it means there is the absence of the other. So, if you are good, then you are not bad. And if you are bad, then you are not good. Now the problem is this distinction really hurts us because we know for sure that we are bad. Okay? We have a good amount of evidence in our lives which shows that we are bad people. Now, if goodness cannot exist with the badness or the evil, then it means I am all evil. Because I do have evidence of evil inside of me. I do have evidence of my stupid behavior. Okay? But we are all a bit hesitant about goodness. If you would ask any person, are you a good person? The person really first thinks about it a little. And then, okay, most people would also answer that, yes, I am a good person, because their definition of goodness is quite loose. But this is how the mind is playing a trick on itself. It's broken down, yet it assumes it's one. And when looking it from the self-centered point of view, it is one. And what is that oneness? Self-profit. Not the great oneness or the oneness of the whatever great teachers have told you. That's not the oneness I'm talking about. I'm talking about the oneness, the integration of the ego. The ego is integrated from the point of self-profit. That's the central movement of the ego, self-profit. And to execute that movement, the ego breaks. It acts in different kind of ways. Okay? Actually, it doesn't even break in that way, because memory makes us feel it's broken. The day I'm being nice to someone is because of self-profit. The day I'm being angry with someone or I am hurting someone, that is also for self-profit. So the ego has not changed its central movement. But by just looking at my action, it appears as if there are two different actions. One is to help, one is to attack. But they are both the actions of self-profit. Okay? So if you can observe this movement, if you can observe this fragmentation, then you would see that you must stay with one point of view to make real progress. Either you say you're totally fragmented, that's fine, or you say you are totally a center, the egoic center, that's also fine. But don't say you are the good and the bad together. That is the biggest illusion, and because of that, there will be no progress. You will always assume, yes, I have goodness in me. Yes, I have the evil in me. Those two things are not going together. So either unite the good and the bad and say, I'm only bad, I'm only good, whatever it is, or just stand on the egoic point of view and say, I'm only selfish. That's also a good point. You can say, I'm selfish. That's it. So every action is according to selfishness. Someday that action appears to be philanthropic action, and someday it appears to be the action of a butcher. It doesn't matter. The intent is the same. So I hope I was able to open this fragmentation and integration principle. The integration of meditation is something totally different. Okay? And I would repeat it again, we have not talked about that oneness here. That is a different kind of oneness, which is part of meditation. This is all from the ego's point of view. This is the all ego-centric activity. And the reason I am focusing on it is because it's easy to detect it. You can see this very clearly in your life. Okay? So I hope you would try it. If there are some questions, if something was not clear, then please write to me in the comments, and we would try to see each other again in the next video then. I hope you're enjoying your winter or summer, depending on where you are.